Welcome to ESA TV, your best source for the latest news, trends, and interviews with leaders from the energy storage industry. In this episode, we'll provide the latest news and updates from the U.S. Energy Storage Association. To get things started, let's talk with the interim CEO of ESA, Jason Burwen. Jason, thanks as always for joining us.
Happy to be here.
There's a lot going on in the energy storage industry. What are the biggest hot button issues of the day, and what can folks do to learn about them?
You know, as we say at the Energy Storage Association, we're entering the storage decade, and we're looking ahead to how the industry is poised to grow through 2030. And that means taking on all of the important topics. I want to encourage folks to come to ESA Con 21 in December, because if you go there, you're going to be learning about, for example, all of the latest technologies for energy storage, particularly long duration energy storage, which is one of the hot topics today. We have member companies who are working in technologies like liquid air energy storage or molten salt thermal storage, different electrochemistries, whether that's zinc air or iron-based chemistries or flow batteries. We have folks who are working on green hydrogen. There's just so much to talk about there, and it's being complemented, in fact, by a really exciting focus from federal policymakers. We've been really just elated to have support from the U.S. Department of Energy and their Earthshot initiative, as they call it, to accelerate the development and deployment of longer duration energy storage technologies with a goal of reducing their costs by 90% within the decade. The fundamental fact is that our industry has a long path to growth, and as we get deeper and deeper into the storage decade, technologies coming up behind present day ones are going to be playing an increasingly critical role. Beyond that, I would say another topic that we are spending more and more time talking about, certainly the future of energy storage, not just as a technology, but its role in decarbonizing our power system, making that power system more resilient. Certainly with the increase in extreme weather events, it's more important than ever to have energy storage installed to ensure the lights stay on, and how we do that and in what configurations with what regulatory frameworks, what business models are really being pioneered today so that we can ultimately reach a goal of not just the ESA vision of 100 gigawatts of new storage by 2030, but also having done so by making our power infrastructure and electric service far more resilient to disruption. With that in mind, there's plenty more to talk about, but I think it's really important that folks come to ESA Con 21. We look forward to seeing you in Phoenix as we reconnect, re-energize, and return to our live event on moving through the storage decade.
There's a lot of discussion on how energy storage will operate in the power system. What about building a supply chain for energy storage here in the U.S.?
That's a subject that everyone in Washington, D.C. is talking about, right? Which is, how are we going to make sure that we have more jobs here in the United States, more economic growth here in the United States, and doing so while also addressing many of the challenges that have come up in recent years with respect to a stable and clean supply chain for energy storage. And that's something that ESA has been engaging on, certainly with members of the administration. The federal government has recently put out its review of particularly the lithium-ion battery supply chain. And in addition to agreeing with numerous ESA recommendations, has made clear that we need a demand-driven strategy in order to actually achieve a robust growth of a supply chain that will be sustained over time. And so we were really pleased to see the White House recommend the investment tax credit for energy storage as a key strategy for doing this. Certainly, this is going to be a topic of great discussion at ESA Con 21. We are really excited to feature important conversations, not just about what it means to, of course, become a manufacturer here in the United States and how to ramp up and scale manufacturing, but also other linkages here in terms of understanding the issues around trade and making sure that inputs remain a stable part of the supply chain. To that end, I also expect that we will have a lot of interactions across the industries where we are joining hands with our colleagues in the electric vehicles sector who are also working on this together, something that we expect to feature as a conversation at ESA Con 21. So definitely make sure you join us December 1st through 3rd in Phoenix.
Certainly some great insights from you and ESA. Thank you, Jason, for joining us today. ESA's policy activities focus on advancing the U.S. market for the full range of energy storage technologies and engaging in regulatory and legislative matters affecting the industry. To give us some insight, please welcome Julian Boggs, State Policy Director at ESA. Julian, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what are some of the key policies that are driving energy storage in states right now?
Sure. Some of the key policies driving energy storage in states right now are state-level targets, incentives and compensation program, and utility planning reforms. State-level targets are a great place for states, to start because they really send a signal to the industry that the state's open for business. And then they can spur regulators and legislators to take on a lot of the other policies that are needed to achieve the targets. This year, with Connecticut and Maine passing energy storage targets, we now have 9 states that have passed energy storage targets. Along with that, I mentioned utility planning reform, making sure that energy storage is being accurately modeled with the most recent cost inputs and making sure that the true value of energy storage is being reflected in planning processes. And ultimately, also, we want to make sure that utilities have access to compensation for the services that they're able to provide, particularly on the distribution grid, as we're talking about state policy. And that utilities and that energy storage has incentives through a growing number of incentive programs that we're seeing across the states to help fill the gap or bridge the gap between the total cost of installing the system and the available revenues. And as energy storage policy progresses, as the market develops, we hope to see energy storage able to access more compensation, get more revenue for the value that it's providing, and of course, see the costs continue to decline. So the incentives eventually decline entirely.
What are the biggest accomplishments in state energy storage policy in 2021?
Sure. It was really exciting this year to see 2 more states, Connecticut and Maine, pass energy storage targets. And so now we have 9 states that have established energy storage targets, particularly in Connecticut, where the 1,000 megawatt energy storage target was immediately followed with a 580 megawatt customer-sided energy storage compensation program to provide both the compensation through a demand response, or as they called active dispatch program, as well as provide an upfront incentive to help narrow the gap between the costs and the available revenues. We saw a number of states tackle property tax reform. So particularly in Virginia, where we're seeing a lot of interest in energy storage, and ESA worked to advance energy storage tax reform to both reduce the tax burden and provide a revenue share or a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes, so local governments who adopt energy storage projects. We saw a number of other states tackle energy storage property tax reform as well.
What are the states to watch that are leading the way for energy storage policy in 2022?
Well, every state is good to keep an eye on, but of course, you always want to look at California being the national leader in energy storage, both in the markets and in policy, with their massive procurements for energy storage and long duration energy storage. This summer, recently just opened up value of distributed energy resources proceeding that will be an interesting one to watch. We are continuing to focus on Virginia and think both with the interest from policymakers and the market potential for energy storage in Virginia, continuing to build upon the energy storage target that was passed in Virginia in 2020. Illinois is still on the cusp of passing comprehensive clean energy legislation, and there's an important energy storage component to that. So we'll certainly be keeping our eyes on Illinois in the legislature this year, and then hoping to do more implementation work in 2022. And lastly, New Jersey, certainly we are eagerly anticipating an energy storage proceeding in New Jersey that will finally make good on the energy storage target that was passed in 2018 to achieve 2,000 megawatts of energy storage by 2030.
Julian, definitely a lot to keep up with regarding state regulatory and legislation news around energy storage. You and ESA are doing a great job of keeping industry professionals informed. Thank you for sharing the knowledge. With less than 100 days until ESACon 21, the momentum to reconnect, re-energize, and return to Phoenix is strong. I had a chance to catch up with ESA Sales Director Justin Aquilante for a few minutes and asked him about this momentum.
Courtney, ESACon 21's momentum the last 30 days is on the hockey stick trajectory. We had a record number of submissions for our call for speakers process. To date, we've had the largest group of sponsors since I've been at ESA, and we're expanding the floor plan in the expo hall given the number of companies looking to participate. Certainly the industry is excited to get back in front of each other, but we have heard great feedback on the value proposition ESA has put forward to sponsors and exhibitors alike. This, in combination with our educational sessions, breakouts, and keynotes, has made ESACon 21 the destination to reconnect, re-energize, and return to face-to-face interaction. The next 30 days will likely be even busier than the past 30. We look forward to seeing everyone in Phoenix.
As you just heard, ESACon 21 is growing fast with an expanded expo hall floor, record submissions for its call for speakers, and 75 plus sponsors. Don't miss out on the industry's largest gathering. For more information, visit energystorage.org. Thank you for watching this episode of ESA TV. As we wrap up, here's a sampling of what you will experience at ESACon 21. Stay connected, and we'll see you next time.